My name is Naomi Mercer. I am 31 years old. The coffee in my hand had gone cold an hour ago, but I had not moved. I stood at the edge of a glass-walled boardroom watching my father sign his name across the bottom of a document that was supposed to end my life's work. About 40 people filled the room. Partners, investors, cousins I had not seen in years, and my brother Ethan Mercer, sitting at the head of the table like he had been born there. My father, Richard Mercer, stood beside him with the kind of pride on his face I had spent my whole life trying to earn. He uncapped his expensive pen and pressed it to the paper. Then he announced that effective immediately, he was transferring full operational control of Mercer Logistics to his son Ethan. He said the company deserved a man who could take it to the next level. Ethan stood up, buttoned his jacket, and accepted the applause with the confidence of someone who had never once read a balance sheet. His wife Sloane clapped the loudest. She wore shoes that cost more than my first month's salary. I did not clap. I did not cry. I did not say a word. I just watched my father smile at my brother the way he had never once smiled at me. And I let him finish. Because he did not know. None of them knew. That the document he just signed was completely, legally, and irreversibly meaningless. To my family, I was the daughter who was never quite enough. Too serious. Too focused. Not the right kind of impressive. To the board and the investors who actually read reports, I was the majority shareholder, the acting chief financial officer, and the architect of every profitable quarter the company had seen in years. My father started Mercer Logistics decades ago with a pickup truck and a regional delivery contract. By the time I joined, the company was bleeding cash, stuck in outdated contracts, and weighed down by bloated overhead and a management structure held together by nepotism and nostalgia. My father gave me a junior finance role and a desk in the corner. He told me to make myself useful. So I did. I spent years auditing every contract, every vendor relationship, every line item that did not make sense. I brought in new freight software that cut routing costs. I renegotiated supplier agreements. I recruited senior operations managers who actually knew what they were doing. We became profitable again. At the year-end review, my father shook my hand and told me good work. Then he gave Ethan a bonus for showing up to quarterly meetings on time. I will not pretend that did not hurt. It did. I sat in my car afterward, in a parking garage, telling myself it did not matter. That work was its own reward, that eventually he would see it. I believed that longer than I should have. Ethan coasted through every role my father handed him with the ease of someone who understood accountability was optional when your last name was on the building. He missed deadlines. He lost a client because he forgot to return a call for weeks. He expensed a golf trip as client entertainment. I flagged it during an audit. My father told me to let it go. So I let it go. What I did not let go was the education I was quietly giving myself. At night, I enrolled in an executive program. On weekends, I studied corporate law. I started building relationships with the institutional investors who held minority stakes. Not aggressively, not with some obvious scheme, just by being present, consistent, and reliable. Then my father had a mild heart attack. Not catastrophic, but enough to shake him. Enough to make him start talking about legacy and succession. I sat with him in a hospital room and we talked for hours about the future of the company. He told me he was proud of everything I had built. Then he told me he planned to hand the company to Ethan because the industry would take a male chief executive more seriously. He said it like he was doing me a favor, like he was protecting me from something. That night, I drove home and made a decision. I stopped waiting to be chosen. I started building the position from which I could not be removed. Over the next couple of years, I quietly and legally acquired shares. When early investors wanted to exit, I bought them out at fair market value using savings, credit, and a small loan against a piece of real estate I had purchased earlier. My attorney, Sandra Pike, was brilliant and discreet. Every transaction was properly documented. Every acquisition was disclosed exactly as required by the operating agreement. No one in my family read the shareholder registry. Why would they? It was my job to maintain it. By January of this year, I held a majority of outstanding shares. I was the majority owner of the company my father was planning to give to my brother. My father did not know because he had never asked. He had never looked at the registry. He trusted me to manage the details. And he trusted Ethan to inherit the reward. That was the ledger of my family, and I had finally learned how to read it. This boardroom meeting was my father's idea. He planned it for weeks. Investors, partners, family, the whole ceremony. He wanted a formal transition. He wanted Ethan to have a moment. I had known about it for weeks. Sandra sat in the back row with a copy of the full shareholder registry in her briefcase. We had rehearsed this. My father caught my eye and gave me a small nod. The nod that meant be gracious. Do not make this about yourself. This is important. I nodded back. He had no idea what I was about to do. What I was not going to do was make a scene. I had watched enough of my family dynamic to know that a woman who raises her voice in a boardroom becomes the story. I was not going to become the story. I was going to let the documents speak. Before you hear what my attorney put on the table, make a prediction. Comment swallow if you think I swallowed it again. Or comment receipts if you think I came prepared. Sandra stood. She was in her 60s. With decades of corporate law behind her. And when she stood, people noticed. She did not raise her voice. She never had to. "Excuse me," she said, calm as a judge. "Before we finalize this transition, there is a procedural matter that requires the board's attention." My father frowned and looked at me. I looked at my coffee cup. Sandra walked to the front and placed a bound document on the conference table in front of Ethan and my father. "This is the current shareholder registry for Mercer Logistics," she said. "Properly maintained and filed in accordance with the operating agreement. Please direct your attention to page 4. Nobody moved for a moment. Then my father reached for the document. His reading glasses were in his jacket pocket, and his hands were not entirely steady as he put them on. He turned the pages. I watched his face. First confusion. Then arithmetic. Then something I had never seen directed at me. Actual reckoning. "Ethan," my father said slowly, "come look at this." Ethan leaned over his shoulder. He read the page. Then he read it again. "What is this?" he said. "It's flat." Sandra replied. "It is the shareholder registry. As you can see, Naomi Mercer holds a majority of outstanding shares. She is the majority owner of this company." Ethan straightened. He looked at me. I looked back evenly. No triumph. No apology. Nothing to prove. "This isn't possible," he said, voice tight. "It is not only possible," Sandra said. "It is documented and disclosed. The registry has been available to any board member upon request." No one had requested it. The room went quiet in that specific way that happens when a group of people realizes they misread a situation. The investors, the minority shareholders who had watched me rebuild the company, were not surprised. Some of them looked almost relieved, like the adults had finally arrived. My father set the document down. He removed his glasses. He rubbed his face with both hands. And when he looked up, the ceremony was gone. If you were watching that room go silent and you saw the truth hit my father's face, what would you do in my place? Comment protect if you would stay calm and protect what you built. Or comment expose if you would publicly call out every lie they fed you for years. My father tried to speak. He had no sentence for this moment. He had spent decades preparing the wrong speech. Ethan found his voice first. He said it was betrayal. He said I went behind our father's back. He said I manipulated the system. He got louder, and the room watched him get louder. I let him go, because I understood optics. I let him accuse me in front of 40 people for legally purchasing shares over years, while meeting every disclosure requirement. When he finished, I spoke. I said I had not gone behind anyone's back. I said every acquisition was documented, disclosed, and available to any board member. I said the operating agreement, the one Ethan had never read, spelled out exactly how transfers were reported. Then I said the part I had not rehearsed. I said that for years I rebuilt this company. I cut costs, renegotiated contracts, recruited talent, stayed late, missed holidays, and dragged Mercer Logistics from a bleeding mess into profit. I said I did that without being asked, without being rewarded, and without being offered the top role that was apparently available as long as your name was Ethan. I said I stopped waiting to be given what I had already earned. I said I bought it instead. The room stayed quiet. My father stood and walked to the window that looked out over the parking lot. He stood there for a long time. Sandra explained the legal reality clearly and without emotion. You cannot transfer operational control of a company to a minority shareholder over the objection of the majority shareholder. The document my father signed was symbolic at best. Ethan had just accepted an award that did not exist. My father asked if there was any path to reversing my share acquisitions. Sandra said there was no legal basis for reversal without fraud or breach. And there was none. The transactions were clean. My father nodded slowly. He picked up the transfer document, looked at it for a moment, set it back down, and walked out of the room. Ethan turned to me and said I humiliated the family. He said I did this to hurt him. I told him I did this to protect what I built. He said I was unbelievable. I told him I agreed, and that he had years to notice. Sandra caught my eye and gave me the smallest look that said, "Let it land." So I stopped talking. I let the room sit with it. The investors began quiet conversations among themselves. One of them stood and shook my hand. "Congratulations, Naomi," he said. The words sat in the room like the first warm day after a long winter. A few others followed. Ethan watched it happen, and I watched him watching it, and I understood that this was the real transfer. Not the paper my father signed, not the applause Ethan wanted. The room turning was what my father tried to gift him. It was not his to give. My father came back later. The ceremony was completely gone from him now. He sat down at the table, not at the head, just in the middle, like someone who needed to think. He asked me what I wanted to do with the company. I told him I wanted to take it to the next level. He almost laughed, not cruelly, just at the precision of the irony. He asked if I had plans. I opened my laptop. I had a full growth strategy prepared. A multi-year plan. Acquisition targets. A new regional model. I had been ready for this meeting for a very long time. He watched the slides in silence. When I finished, he said it was thorough. I said, "I know." He was quiet again, then said he had not seen it. He said he looked at me and saw someone good at details. He looked at Ethan and saw someone who reminded him of himself. And he admitted he made the oldest mistake available to a man in his position. He said it simply, without excuses. Ethan left before the meeting ended. Sloane followed him, her shoes clicking down the hallway in quick, furious steps. I stayed. I stayed for hours, walking through the operating plan with Sandra, the investors, and my father, who participated like a man serving a quiet penance. He did not perform pride. He listened. He asked questions. He agreed to the steps Sandra outlined. When it was over and the room cleared, my father asked if we could get dinner. I said I had work to finish. He said, "Of course." At the door, he turned and said my name. Just my name. Nothing attached to it. I think he was trying to say something he did not have the right words for yet. I told him I would call him this week. I meant it, not because everything was resolved, because years of being overlooked do not dissolve in one afternoon, but because I understand ledgers. I know the difference between a debt that cannot be paid and a debt someone is actually trying to settle. I drove home on the same roads I had driven for years. The city looked the same. My phone had messages from Ethan, from Sloane, from cousins and aunts who suddenly remembered my number. I put the phone face down. I thought about the version of me who once decided that the right response to being overlooked was to shrink gracefully. I thought about the moment I decided she was wrong. I did not feel triumphant. Triumph is loud, and I was tired of being loud in ways no one could hear. What I felt was quieter and more durable. The company was mine now in every way that mattered. Legally, operationally, visibly. I had stopped asking permission to take up space I had already paid for. I pulled into my driveway, sat in the dark for a minute, then went inside, made dinner, answered a couple of emails, and went to bed at a reasonable hour. In the morning, I had a company to run. I always had. Now everyone knew it. If you want more real stories like this, subscribe and turn on notifications. The next one will hit even harder.